Hello, hello. Welcome back to day 3 and our final day of the Create a Happier Military Marriage Now challenge. Thank you to everyone who has already participated and who has already kind of followed along with me. I'm just so excited to have y'all here and have you be part of this with me. You still have until Friday to watch any of the replays and to comment in order to win. So if you haven't done the last few days, that's okay. You still have a couple days to do it. And for today, in order to be eligible for a prize, which the prize is my marriage tune-up, it's with me. I will be talking about it in a little bit. And I am gifting one of this to you all. And so all you need to do is comment on the post with what has been your biggest takeaway over the last 3 days. Like what has stood out to you? What tip, did you maybe not know or that you knew and now you're going to get started? What was your biggest takeaway from these last 3 days? You can do hashtag day 3, but I also will just see you. And so all you have to do is just comment below. And again, thank you everyone who has joined and who has watched either live or the replay. Okay, a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Dr. Lindsay Kavanaugh. I am a psychologist and military marriage coach, and I am a military spouse, and I'm just passionate about helping other military couples to be as strong as possible because this lifestyle is no joke. Okay, today we are going to talk about conflict, and if you all remember, my basic tenet, so to speak, is that really the foundation of our marriage relies on 3 things. The connection, which I say is what makes us feel good. Our communication, which really is the glue that holds everything together. And our conflict. And really what I think is that conflict is what moves a relationship forward more than anything else. And here's why, because if you're having conflict or disagreement with your spouse or significant other, it's your signal that there is something going on, right? There's something that doesn't quite feel good. And that is the thing that needs to get fixed and needs to get worked out. So if the conflict is going well, your marriage or relationship should actually be in a better place, in a stronger place at the end of this. And so this is why I think it's so important for us to do conflict well. One, because I don't know anybody who likes conflict. Anyone who even says they do, I think it's just, they like other parts of it, but nobody likes to fight with somebody else, especially your spouse. And us as military spouses, we don't get a lot of time, and we don't want to spend the little time we do have fighting. So we want to make sure that it is done well. And that is what we want to talk about today. Again, I'm going to come at it from two angles. I'm going to talk about it from mindset and things that we need to be doing to make sure that we're in the best space to have productive conflict, but also things that we can actually do to make our conflict better. So let's start with mindset. And what I see time and time again, and I do this, I'm sure you all do this, let me know if you do so that I know I'm not alone. But one thing that I see a lot is that when you're really mad or hurt or frustrated or whatever, we get into this place of, I want to be right. I need you to know that I am hurt. I need you to understand that I am hurt. I need to be right. Like my point is valid. And it gets sometimes to the point where we are arguing that over everything else. The other thing that we can do is we can go in and say, I hurt, even if we're not doing this consciously, I hurt and I want you to hurt too. And that's where sometimes during conflict we can kind of, throw those little barbs out from time to time. So often what I see is that people go into arguments wanting to be right. I want you to see it from my side, my point of view, and recognize that my point of view is the right point of view, right? And so what I really find, though, is that both people can be right. Like, I can have what I think happened and be hurt as a result of what happened, and my spouse can also be right. And it's really hard when you're in it to see it, but both of you are coming from your own place, right? Your own lens. And so often, especially when I was working with military, they would say, no, like if I'm right, like I'm right. And my spouse will do this too. Like, you shouldn't feel sad because I didn't do this on purpose. I didn't, want you to feel hurt. But the reality is again, through my lens, I am hurt, and that is right, and that's okay. And through his lens, it's also right that he didn't mean to do it. He didn't know it would do it, but we're still here. And so by trying to just argue who is right and whose point is correct, now that's all you're doing, right? You're not having the conversation of, what do we need to do to fix this so this doesn't happen again? How do we not miss each other in the future? And so it's a really hard thing to do when your emotions are all worked up and you can't, kind of see the forest through the trees, so to speak, because you're in that place. Like, when I'm hurt, I just want him to say, like, yeah, you hurt me, and, acknowledge it. But he is on the other side where he's like, I don't want to be the one that hurts you. That's not what I want to do. So here's the point, and this is where I'm saying with mindset. So when it comes to arguments, are you in a place where you are open to seeing that other side? Or are you going into the argument saying, I'm going to be right, and they have to know that I am right? And this, above anything else, will change the trajectory, because there are many times where I am really upset and I know that no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to listen because I am hurt and I just want him to know I'm hurt, and, and I'm going to ground that point in, and I'm not going to hear the other side. So if that's the case, now I need to work on changing that mindset to then be open to, okay, where was he coming from? All right, he didn't try to hurt me. I'm still hurt. And so now what do we need to do about that? Right? So am I in a place where I can have a productive conversation? Am I in a place where I am willing to budge what might happen in order to find a compromise? Because again, I'm not always there. Sometimes I just, I'm hurt. I don't want to compromise. I don't want to, I just want to, get my point across. And really I just want to not be hurt anymore. That is often where this is coming from. So when I'm looking at mindset ahead of time, what I'm looking at is, am I in a place to be open to listen, kind of to understand that we were talking about yesterday? And am I open to a different solution than what is in my head? And this is a big one too. And I'm going to talk about a very specific argument that my spouse and I have had. So we have some kind of in-law stuff where he and my mom do not always get along. And this is something that we fight about probably the most regularly of anything. And I know how I want this situation to be resolved, right? I just want him to be nice all the time. And he has the way that he wants it to be solved, which is like he, wants me to just be on his side. He wants to, and so if we both only go in saying I'm only going to be satisfied with this side. And if he goes in saying I'm only going to be satisfied if, we don't stay the night there or whatever it may be, now again, you're on these kind of railroad tracks, and you're never moving together, and you're never then growing together. And so really it's this, okay, this is what I really want, but what version around this? Am I willing at this point to have a conversation where that switches a little bit, where it changes, where it doesn't end up exactly the way that I want it to be? Is there a way with my emotions that might be kind of getting in the way? So this is what I say with mindset. Are you open to all possibilities? The other thing with mindset is, we all have our own past history with conflict. For some people, conflict, was something that was very loud growing up. For some, like in my family, you just didn't talk about it. If you had conflict, you just swallowed it and it never got worked out, right? So we're all coming with that lens. And initially it was really hard for me to talk about things that I was upset because it just wasn't something that I was modeled. It wasn't something that I knew how to do. It wasn't something that I learned. And I had dated at one point somebody who was the opposite, where they just like screamed out their grievances and then it was done. And so that was really uncomfortable for me, because as I'm kind of like on the edge of my seat saying like, this is too much for me. So really recognizing too, like what your past history with conflict is. How did you learn to have conflict, if at all? Because most of us, again, did not learn to do this. But how was it modeled to you? What was that like? Has conflict been safe for you to have? Do you feel like it gets you anywhere, right? All of these things go into our mindset with what we think about conflict, because it's, what I'm going to bring up to my spouse. It influences how I bring it up to my spouse, and right, all of these things now. So two separate things. One, you're looking at how are you going into those individual specific instances, and you're also looking at just how conflict as a whole has influenced you and how it may be influencing in your current relationship too. I have some really great prompts for you to think about in the workbook. Again, if you still have not signed up, it's not too late. So check those out and kind of work through that, because that in and of itself will save you a lot of time. I say if I'm not in a place where I can like openly listen, I don't have the conversation. Now I know that I need to do some work first before I bring it to my spouse. So whether that's like I need to make myself kind of feel better, I need to just like lash out. Sometimes I need to go for a run. I need to get some of that energy out in order to be able to have the productive conversation that I ultimately want to have. Because that's the other thing. In your conflict, is your goal to be right, or is your goal to grow your marriage? And I think a lot of times we say that it's to grow our marriage, but really we're fighting for this one. So really think about that and be honest with yourself. And if you get into it, this is your permission to say, look, I'm not quite ready to have this conversation. Let me come back in 10 minutes if I can cool down, right? So that is your permission to do that, to really wait to have the conversation. Because sometimes I think I'm okay, and then I get in there, I'm like, oh, I am way too heated to have a productive conversation with you. Because right now, I'm gonna start being mean is what's gonna happen. And best of intention. The other thing is if you do, we all are human. So if I lash out, if I do, the important thing is I know I have to apologize. Even if I'm hurt because of something that he has done, now I know that I have to apologize, right? Before anything else gets solved, I crossed a line. And so that's another kind of good thing to think about too. The next part of this is going to be the action part. Things that you can do to really, really improve your conflict. And if you've heard me talk before, it's with rules. And I will say this until I am blue in the face, and it is just so, so important. Because rules, again, in a sporting match, in anywhere in life, they're there for safety, right? Even safety seatbelt laws, right? It's there to keep us safe. And that's what this is too. In your conflict, you create kind of your rules, and you can use any word you want around that. If rules is kind of a triggering thing, right? Like what the boundaries are, just what kind of context you're working within. What does that look like? And so really what it's doing is it's creating safety. It really helps to protect you all against yourselves, so to speak, to make sure that conversation is going to be productive. Again, I do not recommend having conflict unless you know that it can work out. And so different kinds of things that I like to put in here, I think universally, but really this is going to be an individual thing. So some examples though that I put in: always be respectful. And everyone's version of this might look a little bit different, but always be respectful when you're having conversations. If somebody is not being respectful, that's a time to pause, to come back at a different point when you can be respectful. I really like the only bring up one thing at a time. As somebody who kind of grew up holding everything in, I could then, like, when I got really mad, I would like make the list of all the grievances that I had that I had not been bringing up, right? And so the problem with that is it's so overwhelming, and then the other person, right, if that's me, it's like, oh my gosh, do you even like me? Like, what? And so really figuring out one thing at a time and dealing with that one. And if there's another one, awesome. This also keeps it from, if I'm bringing something up and the other person can't, as sort of a defense mechanism, right? So if I say, like, hey, like, you're not calling me when you say you're going to call me, they're not, well, you didn't do this, right? Okay, we can talk about that, but that's next. Like, first we're focusing on this. Like, you're not just deflecting with just another issue. This works with, if they bring something up, you have to talk about that first, even if there's something that you're frustrated. So that's another one that I really like in there. Another universal one that I find is you don't use things as weapons. So for example, you don't, like sex, like if this doesn't, I'm not going to have sex with you until this gets figured out, or I'm not going to, cook dinner until, right? But sex in particular, like, I want these things to be completely separate from the conflict that you're having. It's really important that especially sex, which is a really great, like, connecting thing, I want to keep that in, like, that, pot, so to speak. And then, you might not be in the mood. It might kind of be related, but it's not if this happens, I'm not doing this. So the other thing that gets thrown out here that would be an example is, like, don't say, if you don't do this, I'm going to divorce you. Like, do not use that unless you absolutely are ready to go down to the court, lawyer, whatever, sign the paperwork and do that. Like, just don't use things as ultimatums. I want your relationship to grow because of the love that you all have for each other, and not out of the fear for whatever ultimatum. Does that make sense? So those are some really good rules to have in place. Now, the rest are going to be really tailored to your relationship. So if I look at some of the rules that we have, again, as somebody who grew up in a very, like, quiet conflict household, yelling to me is really overwhelming. I don't like it. So we have a rule that if either of us raise our voice, the conversation ends and we come back to it at another time. We also have a rule now that we are going to talk about kind of emotions first, address those first, and then we can get into the details. Because one thing that was coming up is I was saying, kind of like what I mentioned earlier before, like, I'm hurt about something. And he would always come back with, well, but you shouldn't be hurt because I didn't mean to do it, and this was my, like, thought process. And to me, I was interpreting that as, you're, like, making it okay to hurt me, and explaining why it was okay that happened. And that wasn't what he wanted to do either. And now we're, like, fighting about something that we're not. Again, you're, like, away from what actually happened. And so what we do is we really try to, let's address the emotion, like, I'm sorry I hurt you, whoever is hurt. And then we can go into the details of it and try to fix that. So then when it comes time to, whatever, again, we do it differently the next time. But he would never need to talk about emotions. Like, he would never need to go there. I do, and that's why it's a rule, because it's something that is important for me to be able to get to the kind of productive conversations that he wants to have. So these are just some examples. The best way that I have my clients create these rules is look at the things that trigger you in your conflict. Is there something your spouse always does that makes it hard? Are there certain things that you always do? Are there certain, like, what about your conflict doesn't seem to be working? And that is a really good place to like create a rule around. So I had one client whose spouse would just always walk out of the room, like immediately, like when it seemed to get heated, just left, and then like never to be, it just never happened that they would have the conversation again. And so one rule that we created was you at least need to stay there to hear the grievance. And if they were going to leave the room, they had to say, I will return in, 10 minutes and after the kids go to bed or whatever. So there was a definite time. So the one knew that they were eventually going to get to have that. And then that the person who was leaving was getting kind of the cool down time, was getting the process time that they needed to kind of like get their head right. And so there's always ways to work this. It's just saying like, what is it that's going on? And then how do we create a rule that works for both of us? While you're doing this, you can also think of like, what are the consequences if you break a rule? So for us, we just stop having the conversation and we figure out when we're going to come back and try it again. So both of us have like, say by the bell style, like time out. If we notice that that's happening and whichever one of us notice it, we just kind of then recognize, go cool down, go to our separate corners, come back and start over. I've also seen people be really successful with, if that happens, then they move into like, you have to say something nice about your partner, like one thing that you really love about your partner, and really, which I actually love this. And I will tell you, this is sort of a tangent that I wasn't going to talk about, but the Gottman Institute really talks about couples that are really kind, so that give each other compliments during conflict, are some of the strongest marriages. So something that's really interesting to think. So, hey there. So the thing with this is that I don't always, right, when I'm hurt or when I'm mad or when I'm just not in a good place, I'm not like, I really love you, right? Like I'm thinking about how hurt I am. And so it's really interesting to see it from this way about, can I, say something nice? I think it helps for two reasons. One, it kind of reminds us that like, I love this person. So this person that I'm mad at and I still care about them, and can I talk to them in that respectful way like I care about them? And it reminds them too that even though this person across from me is really upset and is really hurt, like they still love me too. And there's a lot of safety in that. So whatever you do and whatever consequence, again, it's not like little kid, you're time out, you're in a corner, you're in trouble, but it's more of like, if someone breaks a rule, what do we want to do? What do we want to have happen, and what feels good for us? All of these can be reworked. So as you kind of create a rule, which, by the way, I highly recommend you identifying these and talking about these when you're not having conflict, because it's really hard to have these conversations when one or both of you are angry. So really doing this like outside, and then when you are in it, you might realize, oh, that really, I'm not going to be able to stick to that, or that doesn't feel good, and you can rework these. But at least having a place to start, because again, it creates that safety that you need. Plus, if you're going into it with the mindset of, I am having this conversation because I want my marriage to grow, because I want us to be stronger as a couple, right? What a different position that is than I want my spouse to hurt because I hurt, or I want my spouse to know that I am right. So really, really focusing on those two things will really get you to have the conflict that you want. Now, after all this, I have given you so much information. Probably too much. Again, I love feedback. So things that you like, things that you didn't, send that my way. Don't forget that you need to put down your biggest takeaway over this week in the comments in order to be eligible to win. But really, a lot of this is, easy to think about, and even not always easy, but easier to think about, and sometimes harder to put into practice when you're dealing with just life. Again, you're two different people who does things completely different. And so what we want to make sure is that all the stuff that you're thinking about actually happens, which is why I created my marriage tune-up. And I'm so excited about this, y'all. So if you think about like a car, right? So you take your car in for regular oil changes. And at these, they check all the levels, they check what you're doing and how is it working, and they top stuff off and they tell you to fix stuff, right? And what does it do? It extends the life of your car. And that's what I think about in terms of this marriage tune-up. You don't always need like the long-term counseling. You don't always need to, just really dig in and do some stuff. But what we want to do is recognize that this will extend your marriage if you're doing these tune-ups. And so on these tune-ups, really what we're doing is we're going in, we're sort of identifying in that foundation that I've talked about, are there little cracks or just are there things that we can strengthen? So then now everything else that you do moving forward, that's why you only need these little bits. So the tune-up consists of a 60-minute call with me plus 3 weeks of Voxer support, which is an app that allows you to like message me in real time. So like if you're having an argument, you can check in with me about, okay, this is what I want, I'm going in guns blazing, is that okay, kind of thing. And I did 3 weeks specifically because that's how long it takes to build new habits, which means that's how long it takes to see the results you want in your marriage. And so this is why I created, I'm super excited about this. Again, it's a one-time thing with 3 weeks support, and one of you will win one of these for free, and I'm super stoked about it. And at this point, for anyone who has participated in the challenge, I am offering a 10% discount. The cost is $250, and I'm offering a 10% discount if you have participated, as long as you sign up. If you even want to see if this is something for you and for your marriage, you can still sign up for one of my free calls, and we can just talk about if it is a good option, because I will tell you if that is not the best option. I just had this conversation with someone yesterday where I don't think that this is the best thing. So if you are all thinking about it and you just want to talk it out, get on one of those free calls, but also just if you know that you're ready for a tune-up, if you're ready for me to check under the hood, see what's working, see what's not working, sign up now, get that 10% off. I also accept some payment plans, and we can talk all about that. And I've just really loved being here with y'all. So if there is anything that you want to hear from me in the future, let me know. If there is any feedback that you have from me, let me know. Biggest takeaway is how to connect even on deployment and to do check-ins even on deployment. I love it, yes. Sometimes I always say, like, on deployment, you do all the same things. They might look a little different, but you just like times 6, right? And the conflict is all the same way. You may have specific rules for conflict while they're on deployment, like we certainly do. And the other good thing about having conflict on deployment is I have to work out some of it before I bring it to them, right? And that we have brought to when he's home, because sometimes that just helps. If I can sort of at least get myself calmed down enough, then it ends up leading to a much better situation. So that being said, please don't hesitate. If you have any questions, send me a DM. Please consider signing up for a marriage tune-up. I would love to do one of these with you. I'm super stoked about them. Let's really extend the life of your marriage by just tuning things up along the way. And also, you don't need, with a marriage tune-up, I just need to work with you, the military spouse. Your spouse doesn't need to be home. Nothing needs, right? It just needs to be you and 1 hour of you and your time. So we can kind of be flexible with that, because I just know how this stuff works. And that is a big thing. Your partner does not even need to be in the country for this to work, because what we know is that a marriage is like a circle, and if one starts to change, the other changes too. That's just how it works. And so I have kind of perfected that as well. So anyway, thank you all for being here these last 3 days. It has been super fun. I'm already excited and already starting to plan the next one. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Again, don't forget to comment below about your takeaway. The prize is one of these marriage tune-ups. So free marriage tune-up with me, and I cannot wait. Thank y'all. Have a great week.